Hey everyone, welcome to week 2 of the class. Looks like everybody got through the week 1 stuff pretty easily, or at least nobody really reached out to me with any major difficulties or challenges. So that's great. Glad you came back. Let me talk a little bit about week 2 and what we're going to be covering. So week 2 is the second part of our sort of analysis of some of the early democratic thoughts that sort of led up to the formation of the U.S. Constitution. And so during week 2, in the slides pertaining to lecture 2 specifically, we're going to be looking at democratic theory post-Renaissance. So the Renaissance is going to be a major period of rebirth, sort of by definition, and you're probably some of you are probably familiar with it, maybe from a study of history or art history or civics in general. A lot of different subjects saw sort of a major transformation during the Renaissance. From a political standpoint, what you sort of see is is a major shift in thinking from kind of what the individual can do to benefit the government or the system to what the system can do to benefit the individual. And all of a sudden you find that now the various systems of governance have responsibilities to the people. And in the very early stages of this transformation, it's not, this wouldn't be in the context that we understand it today. This would be very much, times where you can't kill your peasants or those sorts of things. Kind of some of the thoughts and ideas leading up to the Magna Carta, if you will, which is kind of the one of the first recognized kind of declarations of individual liberties. But even that was very, very minuscule. But it's sort of symbolic of a major shift in thinking, which brings us to more contemporary democratic times, obviously, where not only is there emphasis on what the state can do to benefit the individual, but that's really sort of where the focus at large is. And so we're going to talk a lot about some of the early philosophers following the Renaissance. We'll transition to the social contract. The social contract theory is probably the most meaningful area of philosophical literature as it pertains to the development of not only the U.S. Constitution but the Declaration of Independence. It's amazing to me that there's probably no larger group of thinkers that had more directly to do with the ideas and thoughts of the America's founding fathers than the social contract theorists, and particularly Thomas Jefferson was very heavily influenced by some of these authors, and yet we don't really teach it much in our civics classes, and so you're going to get kind of a primer on that today. I do talk a little bit about some of the postmodern theorists, and when I say some, that's it's a very small portion of what's out there. Just to kind of give you an idea of what some political theorists are sort of thinking about and contemplating today, and sort of the transition into critical theory, which kind of really sort of started with Max Weber, Karl Marx, those types of works in the 1800s, when you had the industrialization of Western civilizations and the apparent exploitation of the working class and greater class stratification in general. And all this is actually, if you get a chance to reading this stuff, is really relevant to modern day times when you think about the growing gap between in wealth in countries such as the United States. When there's discussion of the top 1% of earners controlling however much of the total income. So if you ever get a chance to some of my favorite texts in this area, Max Weber's Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, sort of being kind of a philosophy and history geek, sort of kind of rocked my boat, if you will, when I read that for the first time. Another great text that I actually read I think I read it in high school for the first time, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. If you ever get a chance to check that out. It's actually a work of fiction, describes some of the horrid conditions of workers working at meat plants in Chicago, kind of in the late 1800s. But very influential book. Actually, Teddy Roosevelt sort of massively changed a lot of policies with respect to these workers after reading this. And those are sort of more on the critical theory side. Obviously, I talked a little bit about, if you're the more conservative leaning, Ayn Rand, I do mention her. That's a very popular author, Russian author, that deals with concepts of capitalism and sort of personal responsibility within a capitalist system. How much obligation do we have to others? And, she's, if you've heard of the Fountainhead, very popular among more modern day conservatives and also libertarians as well. I talked a little about some of the early predecessors, John Rawls, who does a lot pertaining to sort of education and responsibility to educate everyone and emphasis on the lower class. And so it's just a little bit, just a couple pieces from a few different perspectives to kind of give you an idea of sort of what's out there, but there's really so much more. And so the purpose of this is it'll actually transition to next week we'll talk about the U.S. Constitution sort of at large, and then the following week we'll talk about the Bill of Rights specifically, which are the first 10 amendments. I like to focus, you probably learned about the Constitution in your history class, your government class in high school. I like to actually focus not so much on what the Constitution says, but on what the Constitution does not say, because I think I've sort of found that that's the kind of biggest knowledge gap that I've uncovered in my time teaching this class. Just some of the things that people believe the Constitution represents or does that it doesn't actually do. So we're going to talk about that, and that'll be sort of an easy transition. Then once we do that, we'll get into kind of the institutions. You have a homework assignment this week. It's actually a reading selection from Plato's Republic. Let me actually check because I don't even remember what it is about. Anyways, if it's what I think it's about, I can't remember what it's about, so let me check. If you go in the lessons folder, first half weekly content, and you go into the week 2 assignment, you have 2 sets of reading there. One of those is a piece from Plato's Republic. So Plato was a student of Socrates, and so everything we know about Socrates mostly was written by Plato. Some of the other students as well, including Aristotle, wrote a fair amount. There's a selection from there that I want you to read, and then there's a second selection that's actually I've linked the Cliff's Notes version. Just because it's even a little bit more complicated to read. Obviously, the diction and styles is a little challenging. So, so that hopefully should be a little bit easier for you. You may have to read it like maybe twice just to go through it, highlight important points because it can be a little bit challenging. But there's some questions there that I want you to answer with that, and then once you answer those, you can submit that to the Dropbox and. Either as an attachment or paste it directly into the Dropbox there. This particular assignment, the reason I give it is because, we as Americans live in a society where we're sort of very rah, hooray, democracy. But not everybody was like super keen on democracy, even when the idea was sort of first introduced. And Socrates is one of those. And he presents what I think are some viable sort of criticisms to democracy. And not necessarily to say that I agree with them, and it doesn't matter what I agree with. But I think it's actually a great sort of conflicting perspective to sort of evaluate our own democracy. And that actually segues well to our second discussion post. So the first one obviously was you introducing yourself. This one I want you to sort of address directly a question pertaining to this class. And the question is, by and large, are people capable of governing themselves? So we live in a democratic system, democratic republic. And one of the assumptions there is that people have some say over what the government does in one form or the other. But the sort of, if you back up a little bit, I think the fundamental question you have to ask is whether or not we are capable of governing ourselves in that context. And what I mean by that is, there are a lot of critics who would say that putting issues to a vote basically means that people vote in their own self-interest, and collectively maybe that doesn't work out for the good. There are others that would disagree, such as those that sort of advocate the same type of psychology as was behind the statistics behind voting on the weight of a cow that we talked about last week. So high level question. There's no right or wrong answer. I just want you to get to thinking about it, and don't forget you also need to post at least one reply to another student's post as well. So you should have 2 total posts for that. And that's the assignment for this week. There are some, like I said, some readings this week as well. Let me go back into that folder just so I can remind myself what those readings are. Yeah, so you have some textbook readings. I've also given you a reading or passage. Actually, scratch that. I'm going to remove that because I want to save that for later. A little bit later, we're going to talk about negative campaigning. I had it earlier in the class before because that was during the election cycle, but skip that. So just read the textbook passage. You're not going to see the other one until a little bit later. And later this week, I'll post some early information about the term paper assignment, so that way you can start thinking about that as well. If you don't have your textbook yet, be sure you and get that. We're not going to have our first reading quiz until next week, week 3. So in my opening comments of that week, I'll tell you a little bit about the format of the quiz and what it'll cover, so you have all that information and what you'll need to take that. So again, welcome aboard, everyone, and if you have any questions, let me know, although so far you guys haven't had many. It was great getting to know a little bit more about each of you through your intro posts, so I appreciate you guys doing that, and hope you have a great semester. We're not anywhere close to being done. It would be nice, but I really think and hope you're gonna enjoy this class. So let me know what I can do to help make it better for you. Have a great week, everyone.